The throne room hums with tension. The Death Star's superlaser hangs ready to obliterate the rebel fleet. Lightning dances outside the panoramic windows, casting jagged shadows across the Emperor's lair. Luke Skywalker stands at the center of destiny, his black robes draped like a shadow of what he might become, his lightsaber still sparking from the duel with his father. Across from him, Darth Vader lies beaten, wheezing inside his respirator. And behind it all, Emperor Palpatine laughs, a cruel cackle that pierces Luke's mind like daggers. Good. Your hate has made you powerful. Now take your father's place at my side. In our reality, Luke resisted. He threw away his saber, declaring himself a Jedi. That choice saved the galaxy. But in this reality, everything changes. Luke sees his father broken. He sees the rebellion being torn apart in orbit. He sees visions of Leia, of Han, of all those who followed him, burning, screaming, silenced forever. And then he sees something else, the power to end it, to crush the Empire not as a Jedi, but as something greater. Palpatine leans forward, eyes glowing with anticipation. Luke raises his saber, and instead of resisting, he strikes. Vader's chest plate hisses as the green blade drives through him. The Dark Lord collapses, betrayed by the very son he hoped would save him. Palpatine claps his hands together like a delighted demon. Yes, yes. Now, my young apprentice, your journey to the dark side is complete. The rebellion never stood a chance. The Skywalker legacy has been rewritten in a single stroke. And the galaxy? The galaxy is about to fall into a darkness deeper than anyone could imagine. Tonight, we explore 20 forbidden theories of what happens if Luke Skywalker turns to the dark side. Theory 1. The Emperor's perfect apprentice. Palpatine always believed Anakin was the chosen one, the ultimate Sith weapon. But Anakin's flaws, the compassion buried under his rage, the love he could never kill, made him a disappointment. Luke was different, younger, cleaner, untouched by decades of corruption and self-loathing. He carried the raw Skywalker potential, but without the scars of failure. If Luke fell, Palpatine would waste no time reshaping him. Unlike Vader, who was chained to a broken body, Luke would be strong, agile, unscarred. Palpatine would have his weapon not in a damaged apprentice, but in a golden child of the dark side. Imagine the propaganda. Holonet broadcasts showing the son of Anakin Skywalker standing beside the Emperor, draped in black robes, lightsaber ignited. The rebellion would shatter instantly. Who could fight when the galaxy's last hope became its executioner? But here lies the twist. Palpatine would fear Luke just as much as he exalted him. Sith tradition always ends in betrayal, and Luke's growth would be terrifyingly fast. In weeks, maybe months, he'd surpass Vader's legacy. In years, he might even surpass Palpatine himself. Thus begins the first great fracture. Would Luke remain the obedient apprentice? Or would he seize the throne for himself, transforming the galaxy under his own rule? Theory 2. The death of Darth Vader. Vader's redemption is the heart of Star Wars. Without it, everything changes. When Luke strikes him down, Vader dies not as a savior, but as a victim of betrayal, the same way he once betrayed Obi-Wan, the same way he betrayed the Jedi. His entire life comes full circle, ending not in light, but in the shadow of his son's blade. What does this mean for the galaxy? First, Anakin's prophecy as the chosen one collapses. The one meant to bring balance to the Force dies in failure, his destiny stolen. Second, the Skywalker bloodline becomes synonymous with tyranny. Luke doesn't inherit his father's pain, he inherits his throne. But there's an even deeper wound, the Force itself. In canon, Vader's final act of redemption restores balance. Without it, the Force remains fractured, dominated by shadow. The dark side festers, unchallenged, poisoning the galaxy on a spiritual level. Theory 3. Leia. The last hope in this timeline, Leia becomes everything. She doesn't know it yet, but the burden of destiny shifts entirely onto her shoulders. She's not just a rebel leader, she's the only Skywalker untouched by the dark side. Picture this. Leia learns of Luke's betrayal during the destruction of Endor. Her heart shatters. Her faith in the Force crumbles. But the truth cannot be denied. If she doesn't rise, no one will. With Yoda gone and Obi-Wan's ghost powerless against Luke's rage, Leia must train herself. She has no time for temples, no time for slow lessons. Every battle becomes her classroom. Every loss becomes her teacher. The galaxy begins whispering her name, the light of Alderaan. the sister who defied the brother, the twin flame that resists the night. In one future, Leia becomes a Jedi unlike any other, one who fights not with hope alone, but with the memory of a world destroyed and a family lost. Her confrontation with Luke would be inevitable and heartbreaking. Theory 4. A Jedi civil war. Luke's fall wouldn't just fracture the rebellion, it would divide the Jedi. Hidden survivors across the galaxy, Cal Kestis, Ahsoka Tano, Quinlan Vos, would hear of Luke's betrayal. The debate would begin. Do they destroy him or save him? Some would argue that redemption is impossible, that Luke has inherited his father's throne and must be stopped before he becomes worse than Palpatine. Others, perhaps Ahsoka, would insist that he can be saved, that darkness does not erase the light within. This ideological split could ignite a Jedi civil war. One faction seeking Luke's death, the other seeking his salvation. And in the chaos, Luke himself would grow stronger, feeding off the very conflict he created. Theory 5. The rise of the Dark Rebellion. Here's the most chilling twist. Luke might not destroy the rebellion. He might corrupt it. The rebellion followed Luke not just because he was a Jedi, but because he was Hope incarnate, the hero of Yavin, the slayer of Death Stars. If that same hero declared that the Jedi were wrong, that the dark side was the galaxy's true salvation, many would follow. Imagine Mon Mothma resisting, only to be silenced. Imagine rebel soldiers kneeling as Luke declares himself the new guardian of order. The rebellion would fracture. Some would stay loyal to Leia, others would fall in line behind Luke, believing his power was the only path to victory. The dark side wouldn't just control the Empire. It would seep into the rebellion itself, twisting freedom fighters into warriors of shadow. A dark rebellion, an army of corrupted heroes led by the son of Skywalker. Theory 6. Palpatine's final masterpiece. Palpatine always schemed for the perfect legacy. The Clone Wars, the Jedi Purge, the Death Stars, each was a stepping stone toward eternal control. But if Luke fell, all of those plans pale in comparison. Luke is Palpatine's greatest victory, not because of his power, but because of what he represents. Anakin was seduced by fear and loss. Luke, however, falls with open eyes. He chooses darkness not out of manipulation, but out of conviction. The belief that the dark side can save what the light cannot. This makes him more dangerous than any Sith before. A true believer, a revolutionary wrapped in black robes, Palpatine would declare him as the new Vader reborn, parading Luke's face across the galaxy. Behold the Savior who has embraced truth. The Jedi betrayed you. The Republic failed you. But the son of Skywalker will lead you into strength. The galaxy wouldn't just obey out of fear, it might worship. And Palpatine? He'd finally have what he always wanted. A Sith apprentice who could unite power with myth. Yet he'd know deep down that his masterpiece would one day destroy him. The Sith rule of two always ends in betrayal, and Luke would not wait as long as Vader did. Theory 7. The fate of Han Solo. Few things could shatter the galaxy more than Luke turning on his closest friends. Han Solo, smuggler, rebel, reluctant hero, wouldn't believe it at first. He'd deny it, laugh it off, say Luke was just playing a trick. But the moment he saw Luke wielding his saber in service of Palpatine, the denial would die. And what would Han do? Fight him? Han was no Jedi, but he had courage enough to shoot first. The tragedy is that Luke wouldn't hesitate to strike him down. Picture it. Han confronting Luke aboard the second Death Star, blaster shaking in his hands. Kid, it's me. Snap out of it. You're not this guy. Luke's expression is cold, detached. No smile, no warmth. You were my friend, Han, but you were weak. The galaxy doesn't need smugglers, it needs order. The green blade ignites. Han doesn't stand a chance. This death wouldn't just wound Leia, it would break her. Her love, her anchor, gone at her brother's hand. It would ignite her path to the light out of grief and vengeance. Han's legacy would no longer be the scoundrel who saved the rebellion. It would be the martyr of the Dark Rebellion's first purge. Theory 8. Leia versus Luke, the sibling war. The Skywalker twins were always destined to balance each other, light and dark, hope and fear, sister and brother. If Luke falls, their sibling bond becomes the galaxy's defining war. Leia, fueled by grief over Han and the betrayal of Luke, would awaken her Force sensitivity faster than anyone imagined. Guided by visions of Yoda and perhaps even Obi-Wan, She'd forge herself into a warrior not of tradition, but of necessity. Her training wouldn't be like Luke's. No slow lessons with a master. Instead, Leia would build her connection through raw emotion, rage at Luke, grief for Han, love for her people. She'd become a Jedi forged in the crucible of rebellion, unlike any before her. Imagine the duel, Endor, years later. Leia stands in white robes, wielding a blade of pure light. Luke stands in black, his saber burning like a torch of ruin. The galaxy would stop to watch. Brother against sister, Skywalker against Skywalker. Theory 9. The rise of the Dark Order. The Sith are defined by two, master and apprentice. But Luke might break this tradition. Vader dreamed of overthrowing Sidious and ruling with Luke. But what if Luke, instead of killing the Emperor, kept him alive, while secretly creating his own legion? Picture Luke gathering Force-sensitive children across the galaxy, not to train as Jedi, but as dark acolytes. He'd use his charisma, his mythic status, to lure them in. These wouldn't be Sith in name, but in power and loyalty, they'd be his army. Palpatine would notice, of course, but it would be too late. The rule of two would crumble under Luke's vision. Instead of master and apprentice, Luke would create something new. A dynasty of Sith in all but name, led by the last Skywalker. This Dark Order would be unstoppable. Trained in secrecy, armed with both Jedi and Sith teachings, they'd grow into the galaxy's most feared force. The Jedi would be hunted not just by two Sith, but by dozens, all bound to Luke's will. The prophecy of balance would twist into nightmare. Instead of restoring harmony, Luke would multiply the darkness, drowning the galaxy in shadow. Theory 10. The Force strikes back. The Force itself would rebel. In canon, Luke resists the dark side, fulfilling the will of the Force. But if he falls, the Force tilts too far into shadow. And when balance is shattered, the Force doesn't remain silent. It pushes back. We might see entire worlds awakening with strange power. Vergences of light appearing in random places. Children across the galaxy suddenly manifesting abilities stronger than ever before. The Force would create champions, not Jedi, not Sith, but raw conduits of light to resist Luke's empire. Perhaps a farmer on Lothal, a wanderer on Jakku, or a soldier on Naboo suddenly finds themselves wielding unimaginable gifts. The light side would manifest avatars to resist the Skywalker who betrayed it. And Luke, ever the predator, would see them as rivals to crush. The galaxy would turn into a battleground not just between armies, but between Force-born miracles and a Dark Lord who refuses to let go. This isn't just Star Wars anymore. It's a war of gods and mortals, with Luke Skywalker standing at the heart of it. Theory 11. Vader's redemption denied. 1,200 words. In canon, Luke's compassion redeems Vader, the son saves the father, and Anakin Skywalker reemerges to destroy Sidious. But if Luke falls, that chain of destiny shatters. Imagine the moment. Vader, broken and scarred, kneels before his Emperor, watching his son ignite a crimson blade. For a flicker of time, Anakin Skywalker stirs within him. The father yearns to reach the son, but instead of mercy, Luke strikes down his own father, not out of rage, but out of calculation. Luke sees Vader as weak, a relic of Palpatine's manipulation, and decides to sever him as one cuts a dying branch. Palpatine smiles, watching the generational cycle complete. "You are greater than your father ever was," he says. And this time, it's true, Anakin's redemption never comes. His story ends as the broken Sith Lord, denied the chance to reclaim his humanity. The prophecy of the Chosen One is shattered, replaced by a darker legacy. Luke Skywalker, the Sith heir who proved stronger than both his father and the Jedi before him. The galaxy remembers Anakin not as a redeemed hero, but as the father of its greatest tyrant. Theory 12. The Death Star. Ascendant without Luke to fire the final shot at the first Death Star, what happens? Leia never hears the words, "Use the Force." Wedge doesn't land the last strike. Han doesn't swoop in to save the day. The Death Star survives Yavin. Imagine it, the rebellion crushed in one fireball. Alderaan was a warning. Yavin becomes proof. Billions across the galaxy bow their heads, realizing resistance is futile. Luke, now Darth Vader's heir, could pilot that very battle station. His skill as a pilot and his mastery of the Force make him unstoppable. Palpatine doesn't just have a superweapon, he has a weapon powered by a Skywalker. rebellions don't just die, they vanish. Hope itself is annihilated, and in the vacuum, Luke becomes not just an enforcer, but a god of fear. Citizens whisper his name like a curse. Planets submit before the Death Star ever arrives. The galaxy becomes Palpatine's playground, with Luke as the executioner of entire star systems. Theory 13. Yoda's last gambit in exile. Yoda feels the tremor. The Chosen One has fallen. The balance is broken. What does the Grandmaster do? In canon, Yoda fades into death, leaving Luke as the last hope. But if Luke falls, Yoda cannot stay hidden. He must act, even if his body is frail and his failures heavy. Imagine Yoda leaving Dagobah. The swamp world shivers as he departs, the dark side presence he suppressed surging in his absence. His last journey takes him to Coruscant itself, to confront Sidious and his new apprentice. The duel would be mythic. Not just blades clashing, but philosophies colliding. Yoda, the ancient guardian of tradition. Luke, the young heretic of darkness. The fight wouldn't end in victory. Yoda's power would falter, but his words, his example, would plant seeds, perhaps in Leia, perhaps in another Force sensitive across the galaxy. Yoda's last act would not be to win, but to remind the galaxy that even when light flickers, it refuses to die. His passing would echo not as defeat, but as a challenge. If you fall, who will rise? Theory 14. Leia's dark temptation. If Luke falls, does Leia follow? Grief is the strongest pull to darkness. After Han's death, after seeing her brother consumed by the dark side, Leia might ask the same question that doomed Anakin. What if I embrace the power of fear instead of resisting it? Palpatine, ever the serpent, would see the opportunity. He'd whisper, "Your brother failed because he was alone. You are stronger, more cunning. Together you could rule, not as siblings but as gods." Would Leia resist? Or would her desire to protect the galaxy drive her to embrace power on her own terms? Imagine a moment where Leia confronts Luke, and instead of fighting him, she accepts his hand. The two heirs of Anakin Skywalker unite, not as Jedi and Sith, but as a dynasty of rulers. The galaxy would bend not to fear alone, but to awe. Brother and sister, saviors turned tyrants, their bloodline reshaping history. This dynasty would not just conquer the galaxy, it would rewrite the Force itself. The prophecy of balance collapses into shadow. Theory 15. The legacy of hope. Even in the darkest timelines, hope finds cracks to bloom. If Luke falls, the galaxy does not stop resisting. Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, Lando Calrissian, and countless nameless rebels would continue the fight. They'd become legends not because they win, but because they refuse to bow. Perhaps they'd raise children in secret, telling them stories of Jedi who once defended peace. Perhaps they'd scatter across unknown systems, planting seeds of rebellion that take centuries to grow. The galaxy under Dark Luke would be suffocated, yes, but not silent. Because the one thing even Luke Skywalker cannot extinguish is hope itself. And one day, long after his reign, a new light might rise, not from the Skywalkers, but from those who never gave up. Theory 16. The rise of the Shadow Empire. With Luke by his side, Palpatine's vision of the Empire changes. No longer does he need fragile bureaucrats, regional governors, or fleets to enforce his will. He has a living weapon. Luke Skywalker becomes the face of the Empire. A Sith Lord young enough to inspire fear across generations, charismatic enough to sway crowds, and ruthless enough to extinguish opposition without hesitation. Imagine Luke addressing the galaxy. Your rebellion is over. The Jedi are finished, and the Skywalker name belongs to the future, not the past. The holonet broadcasts his words. Systems that once resisted bow down. Stormtroopers march not under faceless banners, but under the shadow of Luke himself. He becomes myth while still alive. And as the years pass, Palpatine fades into obscurity. He doesn't need to rule openly when his apprentice is the perfect vessel. Slowly, subtly, the Empire shifts. Not Palpatine's empire, but Luke's. The people whisper, the Dark Emperor will outlive them all. Theory 17. The fall of Han Solo. Han Solo's fate in this timeline is crueler than in canon. In the original trilogy, Han becomes a reluctant hero, but if Luke turns, Han's role twists into tragedy. He tries to save Luke, again and again. His loyalty, his stubborn hope in his friend's humanity, drives him to reckless acts. But Han doesn't believe in the Force, not truly. And against a Dark Lord of the Sith, bravery is nothing but suicide. Picture the scene. Han boards the second Death Star during its construction, sneaking into the throne room, blaster in hand. He points it not at Palpatine, but at Luke. "You're still in there, kid." "I know it. You don't have to do this." Luke doesn't flinch. He doesn't argue. He doesn't hesitate. A flick of the wrist. A flash of crimson light. Han Solo's death echoes across the rebellion like thunder. Leia's heart breaks. Chewbacca's roar of anguish shakes the halls of the Falcon. And in killing his friend, Luke severs the last tether to his old life. The boy from Tatooine dies forever in that moment. All that remains is Darth Skywalker. Theory 18. The Unknown Regions. Awaken with the Skywalkers united, or Luke ruling alone, the galaxy shifts into a terrifying new chapter. But the Force itself does not sleep. For millennia, there have been whispers of entities beyond the known galaxy. Beings who do not align with Jedi or Sith, but feed on something deeper. Not hate, not fear, but existence itself. Imagine Luke sensing them. Dark shadows pressing against the edges of the galaxy, older than the Sith, older than the Republic. The unknown regions, stirring with life forms that see Jedi and Sith as children playing with sticks. Perhaps this is the true reason the Force birthed the Skywalker line. Not to destroy Sith or balance Jedi, but to prepare for something even greater. But now, instead of a savior, the galaxy has a tyrant. Luke might see these entities not as enemies to fight, but as power to claim. He ventures into the unknown regions. The Empire follows. The galaxy is dragged into a war against nightmares no one can name. Civilizations collapse. Whole sectors vanish into silence. And in the middle of it all, Luke stands. Not a defender of life, but a conqueror of the void. Theory 19. Leia the Last Jedi. While Luke sinks into the abyss, Leia carries the light. In canon, her Jedi potential remains mostly unexplored. But in this dark reality, she has no choice. Leia takes up the mantle. She trains in secret, guided by Yoda's last teachings, perhaps even by the lingering spirit of Obi-Wan. She ignites her own saber, not as a weapon of war, but as a beacon of survival. Her story becomes the inverse of Luke's. He was the farm boy who dreamed of adventure, corrupted by power. She is the politician who never sought glory, rising into legend because no one else can. The galaxy begins to whisper of the Last Jedi, a woman who defies the Emperor's apprentice. She's hunted, betrayed, always on the run, but her flame inspires countless others. And in the end, Leia does what no one else can. She confronts Luke, not as a Sith or a Jedi, but as his sister. The confrontation is not about blades. It is about truth. It is about family. And it forces Luke to face the one thing he cannot dominate, the bond he cannot sever. Theory 20. The prophecy rewritten, the final and most haunting question. What becomes of the prophecy? The Chosen One will bring balance to the Force. In canon, it is Anakin. Some argue it is Luke, but in this timeline, the prophecy becomes corrupted. Balance doesn't come from Luke destroying the Sith. It comes from Luke becoming something beyond Jedi and Sith, a hybrid, a singularity of darkness and light, where compassion fuels tyranny and attachment fuels domination. The Force itself bends around him. Perhaps this is balance in a twisted sense. No Jedi, no Sith, only Skywalker. But there's another interpretation. What if the prophecy doesn't end with Luke at all? What if his fall is not the failure of destiny, but the catalyst for something greater? Leia, perhaps. Or a new generation of Force sensitives born in secret under his reign. The prophecy lingers, unfinished, waiting for someone brave enough to rise after Luke's shadow. And in that, there's a chilling truth. The galaxy may never escape the Skywalker bloodline. For better or for worse, it is their destiny to shape the Force until the stars themselves fade. The story of Luke Skywalker is one of choices. In our reality, he chose compassion. He chose to see the good in his father. He chose hope. But in this timeline, he chooses fear. He chooses dominance. He chooses the path his father once walked and surpasses him. The galaxy does not end in fire. It ends in shadow. A shadow so vast it touches every star system, every soul, every whispered prayer for freedom. And yet, The Force endures, because for every Luke who falls, there is a Leia who resists. For every Han who dies, there is a Chewbacca who fights. For every empire that rises, there are rebels who refuse to kneel. The Force is balance, not destiny, not prophecy, but the eternal struggle between light and dark, choice and consequence. So the question remains, if Luke Skywalker had turned to the dark side, would the galaxy ever recover, or would his shadow still stretch across the stars, even now?